And we're back. Good afternoon from this side of the world. I would assume local time is also good afternoon for Evgeny from VirtuSwap. Thank you, sir, for joining us. It's great to have you on. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I mean, you guys, people kind of assume like, DEX is a DEX, and you guys are a DEX, but you've taken a different approach to things. Firstly, tell us a bit about yourself and about the project, and yeah, we can get into it after that.
Of course. Yeah, so thanks again for having me. So my name is Evgeny Andres. I'm a finance professor and have been doing this for too many years now. So I've been most of my career I've been at Boston University, and about 3 years ago I moved back home to Israel, and now I'm a professor here at Tel Aviv University, also heading a blockchain research center here. And so, I got into this world of crypto about 5-6 years ago. After first looking at ICOs and first doing this kind of from the academic standpoint, but then eventually kind of got more into the practical side of things, especially with the DeFi summer, almost 3 years ago. That's kind of the time I went into DeFi and more into kind of practical side of things, kind of things, realizing that a lot can be done there. So it's a great. I mean, I'm still extremely bullish on DeFi, and I'm still thinking that there is more potential, relative to what has been realized right now. Part of that is what we're doing. So that's a little bit about myself. VirtuSwap was co-founded by myself and another finance professor by the name of Ronnie Michaeli, who has been at Cornell University for most of his career. Right now, he's at the University of Hong Kong. Since we founded it, we actually were joined by some really exceptional individuals who work with us right now. I'll give you just a couple of examples. So our head of data and business is Alex Zeidelson. He used to be a CEO of Beam, which used to be quite a successful privacy-preserving blockchain project. So he was heading Beam for about a couple of years. Our CTO, his name is Daniel, and he's been in this Israeli intelligence unit 8200. It's quite famous, and he's been doing some startups first outside of the blockchain sphere for the last 5-6 years in the blockchain space, and he's fantastic. And we have a great team also, other fantastic developers and data scientists. We do quite a lot of data work, so we need those. And they're very good. We have a great kind of marketing and community team and operations. I think it's that's probably the thing I'm most proud about when I talk about VirtuSwap.
Okay, so obviously there's a lot of big brains in the room. I mean, it's not just kind of like we normally like have kind of like these like almost flamboyant and crazy like 20-year-old and early 30-year-olds, and it's quite refreshing to be sitting in the room with someone who's kind of like comparative to my age. I mean, I always joke kind of like family dinners or whatever the case is, and it's like I'm always the oldest guy in the room. It's nice to have not only an older person in the room, it's also nice to have a professor. And it seems like you guys have obviously done, I would assume, a fair amount of due diligence. And I think, I mean, it doesn't surprise me in terms of what VirtuSwap is doing. And obviously we're going to get into it now. That's the whole point of this chat, is that you guys obviously are picking up where the challenges are, where the problems are, and what needs to be fixed. I'm sure there's probably another 100 ideas that will come from this. There's only so much you can do in one go. But I think in a nutshell, if at all possible, what did you guys identify as being kind of like the biggest challenge around why you created VirtuSwap, and what does it do?
Sure. So this is a great question actually to start with. So I'll start a little bit earlier actually. So I'll start with kind of DeFi in general. So DeFi to me has huge potential in solving many of the problems with centralized finance, right? So centralized finance is plagued with a bunch of problems. Lots of information asymmetry, right? You don't know who your counterparty is, and it's just very expensive to do things. Many of the things are outdated. There is a nice number that I often like to quote. About 8% of US GDP and GDP in developed countries in general go towards financial intermediation, right? So this is money wasted, and DeFi has a potential to solve this. Now, DeFi is big, and we are focusing on sort of the core part of DeFi, which is basically exchange, right, or trading. If I want to kind of focus more on DEXs, so DEXs have huge potential relative to centralized exchanges for all the problems, with centralized exchanges that we're all obviously aware of. They're not regulated, and bad stuff happens, as we witnessed, recently, right? And the fact that there is a lot of fake, wash trading on centralized exchanges, that's not good. So DEXs solve many of those problems. However, DEXs, really haven't reached their potential yet. So if you compare the amount of trading, the volume of trading on DEXs relative to centralized exchanges, it's about 10%, right? So far, about $3 trillion, have changed hands on DEXs, and that's about 10% of the volume, overall cumulative volume on centralized exchanges. Right? And so the question is, why is that the case? And an answer is that basically, because of this feature of DEXs that rely on liquidity pools, right? Trading can only be cheap or comparable in price to centralized exchanges if there is deep liquidity between two assets. Okay, so if you're thinking about trading between USDC and USDT, or Ether against Bitcoin, that's all good, right? There is a lot of liquidity, right? And the fact that a lot of people now are using aggregators, right? So liquidity sort of is pooled together from different DEXs, into the trade. That's all good. However, if you go outside of the main assets, right? So let's say you want to trade, Link against USDT. Okay, a pool like that does not exist. Right, and that means basically that to do a trade like this basically means that you have to do two trades, right? You have to go to two pools, right? First, you take your Link, you sell it into Link USDC pool, assuming it's large enough, and then you take your USDC, and then you trade it, for USDT in the second pool. So doing those two trades, it has disadvantages, right? You basically pay everything double, right? You pay double the fees. Okay, double the price impact, double gas, right? Everything is double, not efficient, and that is the reason that DEX has kind of led centralized exchanges, especially in this type of trades. Now, many people think that this is basically not a market that should be addressed because it's small. Now, this is not the case. Over 20% of trading on DEXs are of this kind, right? Those inefficient trades in this longer tail assets, what we call 99% assets, right? So 20% or slightly over 20%, despite the fact that those trades are expensive, right? So imagine a situation where those trades would be cheaper, and that would be a larger kind of part of the market, right? And so this is the market that we are trying to address. Now, basically the first kind of question that we asked ourselves, right? So I personally, and people in VirtuSwap in general, so we believe in markets, okay? And so the reasonable question is, why didn't the market take care of the situation, right? Why are those pools small, right? Why are there insufficient liquidity? And the answer is that, liquidity providers, they're maximizing their profits. They take into account the impermanent loss, but they're profit maximizing people or entities. And so it does make sense. It does not make sense to put money into Link USDT pool just because there are not enough trades, right? So they're exposed to impermanent loss, and the fees are just not big enough to to compensate for that. And so that's the reason those pools don't exist, right? And DeFi kind of is a quintessential market solution, right? It all depends on what people want to do, right? Nobody can force anybody to establish or to put money into a liquidity pool. And so that basically led us to think that this problem cannot be solved at the level of a pool, right? So I cannot force people to put money into, USDT link pool, right? Just because there's not too much trading. So I can do this for a little while, I can introduce kind of protocol rewards and bribe people to do certain things, right? But in the long run, that is not going to happen. So that means that, this problem, it cannot be solved at the level of a pool. So it has to be solved at the level of an asset, right? So there is enough trades, involving Link, right? And there's enough trades involving USDT. So if only, we could come up with a system where all of the liquidity in Link is going to come to a particular trade where a person wants to buy Link, right? Or all of the liquidity in USDT is going to come to the trade where a person can buy USDT, regardless of what the other asset is. Then possibly we can solve this problem, right? And that is exactly what we basically do in VirtuSwap, right? We basically design a system that, I'm obviously happy to talk about, where the result of which is that the liquidity goes into the trade, right? All of the liquidity available in the system goes to the particular trade, and that clearly increases kind of the size or the depth of the liquidity pool and basically makes every trade direct, right? And reduces substantially the amount of the fees and price impact and the gas that people need to pay.
Okay, so you have to correct me where I go wrong here. Okay, so in summary, there's not sufficient liquidity out there in order to do direct trades. You essentially have to go through all these extra, up until VirtuSwap, we've had to go through these extra steps, gas fees, all of that kind of stuff, slippage, all of that kind of stuff comes into play. And you're essentially, you probably end up paying like 2.5 times the price anyways. You might think it's cheap, but it's not. For those of you who think it is fine the way that it is, it's not. And especially when you start doing bigger transactions, it becomes a one-sided thing, and that's towards the DEXs that aren't providing this service. So from that point onwards, we've identified the problem. We've identified possible solutions around that. Now is the opportunity to figure out, for you guys, you figured it out. So how did you guys go about building this mechanism? I think you've named it as well. You've got a mechanism that you've actually introduced into the mechanics of the way that you go about doing a trade of this nature. So you're obviously eliminating what is termed a triangular trade. You're eliminating that. Is that correct? And you're making it a direct trade. Yeah,
that is right.
Okay, so tell us how you guys have gone about this from a mechanism perspective.
Sure. So let me actually do a small detour, if I may, a really short one.
Absolutely.
To basically talk about how, so people have identified this problem, right? So there was one solution that has been tried, and it doesn't seem to work, right? And so that's why we kind of thought about, what are the other kind of, what is the other approach to do this? So the solution that has been tried is multi-asset pools, right? So pools that involve not just two assets, but more than that. They're sometimes called omni pools. So they're used in Balancer, for example, and they're used in, there's a DEX called Hydro and Polkadot that tries that. So the idea basically is to put a lot of assets together in the same pool. And basically that obviously means that all the trades among those assets are going to be direct. Now, the problem with this approach is that basically if you put a lot of assets into the same pool, you expose the liquidity provider to an increased number of sources of impermanent loss risk, right? So the impermanent loss happens when the exchange rate basically changes between the two assets, right? And so if you have 5 or 10 assets, right, there's so many sources of changes in the exchange rate, right? That, this is basically, this is the place that MEV bots, love, okay? Because there's so much stuff to do there and to drain, money from the pool. And so that's why you basically, despite the fact that on Balancer, there is a limit of 8 assets in a pool, you never see pools of 8 assets, right? You see 4, at most 5, and most of them are going to be very highly correlated. So that just doesn't work, right? Because the risk is too large. And so the way we do this is different. So what we do is we basically have 2 asset pools, right? So still 2 assets. And we actually use the same type of math, the simplest math as in Uniswap v2, although our solution is completely orthogonal to the type of pool math that can be used. But so we have pools of 2 assets. The innovation is that those pools basically can accept other assets as what we call reserves, right? So think of a 2-asset pool, like in Uniswap V2, plus some safe deposit boxes that can accept other assets. Initially, those safe deposit boxes are empty, okay? But each one of them can accept, a different other asset, right? Which is not a native asset of the pool. So let's do an example. So let's say that you want to buy Link and you want to pay with USDT, okay? A pool like this doesn't exist. What exists is a, say, Link USDC pool, okay? So what you do, you go to this pool, you take the asset that you want, which is Link, and you send the asset that you have. In this case, it's USDT. And this asset goes into one of those safe deposit boxes attached to the pool, right? It doesn't go to the pool directly. It sits kind of, alongside the pool. Now, how do we know how much USDT you should send, right, to get your Link? For that, we do kind of the triangulation of composition of different pools in our system, right, to basically build what we call a virtual trading curve, right, between USDT and Link. Now, as a trader, you're completely indifferent whether you're trading with a direct, kind of normal liquidity, right, normal trading curve that is based on liquidity that actually sits in the pool, or this virtual trading curve that we built for you. And basically the only difference is that the asset in is going to go to the safe deposit box, right, to a reserve as opposed to the pool itself, right? But to the trader, it doesn't really matter. Now, what happens next, right? For the trader, it's all the trades are direct. However, pools now have these reserve assets, right, that don't serve any purpose, right? They're not used for trading, right? They're just sitting there in those safe deposit boxes. So we have built a system where pools basically constantly analyze, what are the reserves that are sitting there in the reserves in other pools, and whether there is a situation in which those reserves can be exchanged directly between pools, right? So imagine our pool, this Link USDC pool, has a reserve of USDT. There is some other pool of USDC against something that has a reserve of Link. Those two reserves can now be exchanged, where the reserve assets are going to be sent to other pools where they constitute one of the main assets in the pool. Now, so this basically is a completion of the trade, right? So the trader just does the first leg of the trade, right? It's always direct. Pools themselves later on complete the trade by exchanging reserves between them. And so this the completion is actually very cheap. Pools don't charge each other pool fees. There is no price impact. The prices are determined again by some triangulation of pool compositions, in our system. And so you only have to pay a little bit of gas, right? That's about it. And so this is basically a system where pools sort of work together for with the same goal of providing direct trades for pretty much any trade you want to do, right? Regardless of the actual composition of the pool. I want to add a couple of words, about the liquidity provider, right? So we talked about traders, we haven't talked about LPs yet. Now, for LPs, it might seem like a very question.
Hang on, Evgeny. Just before you continue, just something that's like really, I think, like quite important around understanding this whole mechanism is like you describe liquidity pools as one entity where obviously people are providing liquidity within those pools, they're earning the fees, essentially the yields off the back of that. What is the difference between a liquidity pool and what you describe as being a safety deposit box or the equivalent of a safety deposit box? Is it ownership driven? So do you own the safety deposit box? Are you essentially moving that liquidity around? Or is it the liquidity out of the pools that's being essentially allocated in a hypothetical way? I mean, I don't know if that question makes sense, but that's the way I'm picturing it from our side.
No, it's actually a great question. So let me kind of clarify this. So the pools themselves, they behave the same way as Uniswap pools, right? So they're LPs, they own their share of the pool, right? It's all the same, right?
Yeah.
The only difference is that this pool owns the main assets. So in our example, it's Link USDC plus a little bit, and I'll say in a second why it's a little bit, but a little bit of other assets, right? So a little bit of USDT, maybe a little bit of Matic, right? And this ownership of other assets, right, is very temporary, right? It's up to the point where those assets can be moved out of this safe deposit box in exchange for one of the two main assets of the pool. So our goal is, and I'll come back to this when we talk about LPs. Our goal is that those safe deposit boxes are going to be as small as possible at all times, right? Because this is basically something that LPs literally sign up to, right? So if you gave liquidity into Link USDC pool, right, you don't need anything else, right? And those are the assets that you want, right? So we want to make those safe deposit boxes as empty as possible at all times. And that's why we have this system of constant exchanges of reserves between pools, kind of draining down the level of reserves, right? Making sure that the composition of the pool is 99% the two main assets of the pool.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell us about the LP pools themselves. I mean, is that okay?
Yeah. No, so that's the natural kind of natural point, kind of to continue with, right? So LPs, right? If you think about an LP to any DEX, right? The trade-off is very simple. You get the fees, you might get some protocol rewards, and you pay the impermanent loss, right? So this is the only thing that LPs care about. In V3, they also care about kind of moving liquidity, but this is the basic trade-off. So in our case, right, you might think, if you go and become an LP for VirtuSwap, right? Why do this, right? There is this extra source of risk, right? You have this extra assets in the reserve. What's the advantage, right? So at first, actually, we'll talk about why we think that this risk is actually very small, and then what do you get as an LP for taking this risk upon yourself? So why is this risk small? A few reasons. The first one is we basically make it small, right? We basically say that the amount of the value of the reserves relative to the value of the main two assets in the pool can never exceed 2%, right? So all of the reserves together can never be 2%, of the value of the pool. Now, what happens if they reach 2%? Well, then this pool basically closes itself to those reserves-based trades, right? It cannot accept more reserves, and temporarily it basically becomes a simple Uniswap, V2 pool. Okay. In addition to this, right, you might think that some bad assets, some shitcoins are going to enter kind of the reserves. In principle, it's true, and we have kind of thought about this. But initially, the VirtuSwap, the DAO, basically restricts the set of assets that can enter into the pool, right? So basically, we have an allow list of assets. And, kind of to make things concrete, it's sort of the top 50 assets, on a blockchain, right? So top 50 by market cap, top 50 by trading. So it's not like new projects or shitcoins that might be very risky. It's things like, Link or Matic or, or Ape, things of this sort. Okay. Now, finally, what's I think is the most interesting and impressive is that despite the fact that we set this limit of 2%, right, the value of the reserves relative to the overall value of the pool, we almost never reach this threshold, right? We almost never reach 2%. Why? Well, because trades happen in different directions, different pools accept reserves of different assets, and those reserves are exchanged constantly, right? So we've done tons of simulations, incorporating all the data, on Ethereum and Polygon, right, simulating all the trades and arbitrages and liquidity provision, withdrawal, and so forth. And we almost never get to a situation where this 2% threshold is reached, right? Now, of course, once we launch, and we'll talk about launch, I guess, the remainder of this interview, we'll be able to make the same claim using real data as opposed to simulated data. But it seems like we almost never get to this 2%, and so this extra risk that the LPs are taking is there, but it's very small relative to what LPs get, right? And what LPs get, is basically, I'll first kind of give you the result, and then I'll explain, how we get to this result. So LPs on VirtuSwap can get up to 5 times the fees for the same level of liquidity. Okay. So it's the same impermanent loss, right? In fact, sometimes we have smaller impermanent loss than elsewhere. We might talk about this. This is a smaller point, but the big point is that we get up to 5% returns, right? Fee-based returns, and there are two reasons for that. The first one is kind of the one that we already kind of touched upon, and that is that trades on VirtuSwap are cheaper than trades elsewhere. Okay, and so if you think about a system and an aggregator, right? Take 1inch or Kyber or Paraswap, right? It basically takes all of the DEXs, right, and breaks the trade and routes parts of liquidity to different routes, right, to different DEXs. And the way aggregators do it, right? They basically try to make sure that the marginal cost of the last dollar of trade is the same across all routes, right? That's the condition that they implement, right? And basically, given that our trades are cheaper, right, we don't have to do this double trading, right? We limit all the double costs. That already means that $1 of liquidity that is put at VirtuSwap kind of works double the time, right? It's kind of it serves kind of double the trade, right? So just that gives you twice an increase approximately of the returns, fee-based returns to liquidity providers. In addition to this, and that will connect to another kind of part of our chat, I suppose, is that we are much more serious than I think any other kind of player in this field about where liquidity should be, right? So we have built kind of a liquidity optimization system, right, where we try to incentivize people to put liquidity into places where we think it's going to work the best, right? It's going to be useful, the most useful. And that creates another kick, right? So that is kind of the combination of this different financial engineering and kind of data science or optimization that we'll talk about. That is what brings it to 5x in terms of fee-based return.
Wow. Okay. So there's obviously a lot of ambitious delivery of essentially reward here. So it comes down to obviously incentivizing potential customers, and you've got your incentivization around the fact that people aren't obviously paying that extra fee. You saying, well, we'd much rather take that cost, or not the cost, but take that profitability and give it to our LP providers, which is great. I mean, obviously you need to be incentivizing. I want to just go back to obviously a really important part of this whole thing, and that is that how do we look at incentivizing, but then obviously keeping people present, because that's obviously, the biggest challenge with anybody who's offering, great reward. You've got your mercenaries coming along, they're parking their capital, they're taking the maximum they can, and then they leave, and they kind of like leave you, standing without the liquidity. How do you guys plan on addressing essentially probably one of the greatest challenges that this space has to offer?
Yeah. No, so great question. So it's a common problem, right? And it's not a problem that is specific to us, right? So people like to place their liquidity in the most secure places, right? So if you go and put your liquidity in Uniswap, you might be okay with smaller kind of smaller rewards or fees, right? Because you know that your money is safe, right? And it's really a challenge for an up and coming DEX to first attract liquidity and then keep liquidity. And so of course, we are doing all of the solutions that everybody else is doing, right? So we're doing a bunch of audits, right? We have undergone basically 4 different audits, for our smart contracts, right? We're building our community. We're making sure that our team is I think quite impressive and completely in the open, right? So all of those things are there, but I think we have an additional element that distinguishes us from others, and that is our tokenomics, right? So our tokenomics, was designed in order specifically to try to solve this problem, right? Of people kind of leaving, right, or dumping the tokens, right, and exiting with stable coins right away. So we basically try to kind of to think what the problem is. So the problem is that there is not enough incentive, right, to stay with the protocol token, right? Because there's no point of doing this, right? It's better kind of to just exit with some other kind of bigger asset and provide liquidity in it. Okay? So we looked at what's out there, and the best solutions that we've seen is basically solutions that incentivize people to not sell, right? And people, protocols who do this well are Curve and Balancer, right? So they have this incentive for for locking CRV in the case of Curve, right? So the problem though is that in the current market, right, asking liquidity providers to lock their tokens for a significant amount of time. So Curve does it up to 4 years. They started a year ago, right? It was fine then. It seems crazy right now, right? So people are not going to do this. And so we basically set out and basically designed a mechanism, and it's actually a pretty difficult technical implementation. But we were able to do this, which basically is a system where when you stake your token, right, we constantly count the duration of your staking relative to the duration of the staking of other people in the system, right? And so the longer you stake your token without a requirement to lock it, right? You can basically take it anytime. But the longer you stake it, right, the bigger share of the protocol rewards you're going to receive, right? So if you have staked your token for a week, chances are you're going to keep doing this because the second week you're going to get more than in the first week, right? And so forth. So the idea basically is to give people another option, right? What to do with their VRSW tokens, not just selling it, right? And so this prolonged rewards for prolonged staking, right, is I think a solution that may work, right? We'll see in practice, right? But this is something that makes kind of financial sense.
So I think I personally think that this is probably the worst time to run any kind of experiment, because it's so freaking PvP at the moment, and it's like, I think the majority of ideas that get presented, and this isn't a slight on what it is that you guys have got planned. I think it's just more an awareness around the challenges that we are faced with at the moment. And you just see it. This is my second proper cycle that I've been through, and I think this has in many ways been almost worse than the last one, just purely because there's been a lot more liquidity around. So there's obviously the opportunity to make profit in a short period of time is really high. So if you make any kind of profitability, the mentality right now, and if people don't realize this, they do eventually realize it. Even the most inexperienced realize, I got to cash it in. I've got to take profits. It's like something that people talk about all the time. And I think that the real challenge here isn't the genius of it all. I think what you guys are doing, there's plenty of genius here. There's plenty of great ideas. There's plenty of understanding problem, intellectualizing, like theorizing, and then practicalizing the whole thing, if that is in fact a word. But you know what I mean. It's like we're going about it in a very clear understanding. This is the landscape. This is how we're going to tackle this thing. And even with that in mind, you still have that element where people just want to take profit and they're just completely mercenary. And I think that the real test here isn't necessarily what you get wrong or right now, is whether what you guys build is sustainable, even if it's even if you hanging in by the skin of your teeth, because a lot of projects are at the moment, and they're going to be fine because their ideas are sound, they've got great policy, they've got great governance process. And I know that you guys are very, very much focused around creating a DAO and doing the decentralization thing, and I think that's really important. But at the same time, it's really important to get those fundamentals right. And to conclude, I think you guys are going about it in the right way. It's very clear. I mean, that's the reason why we wanted to bring you on, because, we get a lot of people who approach us and say, we're doing a DEX, we're doing this, and we're trying to incentivize that. But they don't really care about the sustainability of the project. And what I'm seeing here is that it's like, listen, we all want to make money. That's cool. We'll make money doing this, but we want to create a sustainable environment which will allow us to do that. And I think the like I said, the challenge here is it's going to be really interesting to see whether people do want to actually reside in the token and benefit off whatever there is there for them to take, and to say, you know what, I need to take a medium to long-term view on this thing, which is so lacking at the moment. But that's what we need. And I think the education here from our side as well, like when we go out there and we talk about protocols, it's like the one thing that we want to get across is like, guys and girls, this is like, this whole space is changing now. We're going from like this whole small-minded short-term thing to protocols are saying like, we want to reduce emissions. We want to actually create something that's going to be around for the next 5, 10 plus years, where, you know, the full extent of our emissions will take 10 years to actually recognize or realize. And those are the projects I believe, and we believe, I think, in terms of what Blockmates is doing, we believe those are the projects that are actually the ones that are worth looking at. So sure, maybe you guys launch next week and it's just going to be priced down. We don't know. But the point is, you're building something that is substantial and that is absolutely long-term based. And I think that's what it's all about. Please excuse the rant, but it's just something that, like, I think is really important in the space. And I don't think we can talk about it enough.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So well done for that. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that experiment plays out, because I think the idea around the way that you guys are incentivizing this thing is sound. I think it's just something that makes absolute sense. And if you do it with that sustainability in mind, which I can see you are, I see no reason why you guys won't be around in a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, because it's kind of like we've identified a problem. We've identified how to solve the problem. We've de-risked it to a certain extent. And I want to just chat to you about that, and also the launch as well, which is really important to this discussion, is that obviously you guys have done your audits. You're launching next week. So for everyone who doesn't know, VirtuSwap is going to be launching next week. They've got an airdrop that's coming up. So we'll chat about that in a bit. But audits, I mean, obviously that's a big thing, very important thing. We've spoken about, I mean, I've run workshops around audits and kind of creating education around that. I'd love to hear how you guys have approached it, and especially kind of like how you've cordoned everything off and you kind of like creating isolated entities.
So I mean, clearly, as a new project, right? We need to first ensure for ourselves and also convince others that what we're building is solid and is not subject, to any types of manipulations, right? So we actually started with audits very early on. So we did our first 2 audits on basically the first version of the code before we deployed it to the testnet. So we've done 2 audits then with the CERDIC. And with Pessimistic, that's another audit firm. We've done that in around October of last year. And we started with our incentivized testnet in November of last year. So we've been doing this for half a year now. And we've discovered obviously a lot of things throughout this, the testnet process, right? And, we've been fixing them. Around February of this year, we started a bug bounty program with Hack and Proof, which has a great community of hackers, that try to find things. In fact, we had one case where a really serious, severe bug was found not by an auditing firm, but by a hacker, through the bug bounty program. So that was fixed, obviously, but this was super useful. And lately, we've done 2 other audits. The first one is by basically a re-audit by CERDIC of our initial kind of smart contracts, but we've added a lot of things, so it sort of was like a new audit. And we're also doing a separate audit by Hacken, not the Hack and Proof, but by Hacken, the audit firm, of all the smart contracts relating to kind of tokenomics and staking with VirtuSwap, right? It's because we have built something there that it's completely unique. This idea of kind of counting staking without locking. It actually, there are some interesting kind of tricks how to do this, and so we need to ensure that all of that is sound. And so those basically are the four audits plus the bug bounty that we've done So far, I'm sure we'll be adding more things going forward. More audits are going to appear then.
Yeah, I think a really good one as well is Code for Arena. They're really good in terms of those bounties. I think that's excellent place as well. I know a couple of guys who primarily work directly off Code for Arena, and they've created a business out of that. They go and they find vulnerabilities, and got a good friend of mine who's actually made 7 figures, over the last 2 years just doing that kind of stuff. And it's like quit his job. He's obviously a programmer, just really taken it to, the nth degree. I think it's really important from that perspective, getting that right. And also, I think from a DeFi native perspective, people demand that. It's kind of like who's done your audits, how immersive are you, and how often are you doing them? It's not just a case of doing one audit. It's obviously a really important aspect to be doing it all the time. And especially if you guys are dealing with liquidity, and especially if you're dealing with, I hope for your sake, large TVLs coming through, and it's really important to get that together. A curious question from my side, just to deviate a little bit. Why did you guys choose to go to Polygon?
Good question. And I think there are 2 answers. The first one is that Polygon is, I think, a good playground for us. And I'll explain what I mean here. So all the big players, including the big aggregators, are on Polygon, right? So that's a good thing. On the other hand, if you look at the liquidity currently available on Polygon and say Ethereum mainnet, right? It's at least an order of magnitude difference, right? So
yeah.
So basically, it's easier for a DEX like us that has several important advantages over others, but not a lot of liquidity to begin with. It's easier kind of to stand out in Polygon relative to Ethereum, right? And clearly, once we establish our place in Polygon, we actually have quite immediate plans to also launch on zkVM, kind of the zero knowledge network that the Polygon has started. After all this, of course, we're planning to expand to other kind of layer 2s and also to Ethereum mainnet eventually, once we have traction and liquidity. So that's the first reason. The second is we're actually pretty close, very close to the Polygon ecosystem. So our investors include the Polygon founders, so Sandeep and JD, as well as the head of Polygon DeFi, Hamza. And so they've been helping us quite a lot, throughout the way, just in terms of kind of building the community and marketing, also a lot of advice. And so it seems like, this support, not just it has been kind of useful for us in the past, it also will be useful going forward.
Yeah, I think Polygon has got a really strong foundation around, the community. I think that's obviously like one of the things. I think it has taken a little bit of a blow with obviously the bear market itself, and it all seems to have kind of like aggregated into Ethereum, and then obviously from the layer 2, we all know that Arbitrum's done extremely well over the last 12 months. But what Polygon has got, which I think it will always have, is that it's got this really strong community. And then what I've also found is that Polygon projects are generally like really loyal to what it is that they've done on Polygon. And even when they do go to other ecosystems, they stay true to what Polygon has to offer, which is really, that's kind of like your proof. Don't listen to what they say, look at what they do. And
right.
I've seen a lot of good things from Polygon projects themselves. I think people like to make fun of Polygon. It's like kind of like this thing, but then people make fun of Solana as well. And both Solana and Polygon, in my opinion, they kick ass. They deliver. They got a strong community. There's solid money there. And the fact that you've got founders that are backing you guys speaks volumes. That's huge. So kudos to them, and kudos to you guys for also looking at other ecosystems. I personally think, where the volume is right now, you guys will do extremely well. Like Arbitrum, I think, is a no-brainer. I mean, obviously there's still a long road for you guys to travel, But my guess would be that if you were on Arbitrum, you'd be absolutely killing it. You know, like this product and what you guys have built will just kill it, you know. And I'm sure you've got a whole lot of other ideas around what you'd like to do. So let's get into that. I mean, I'd kind of like revisit some of the topics, but I'm really curious to hear, like, what is your vision for VirtuSwap? Like, what would you like to see short term, medium term, long term? So, I mean, I know short term, you guys have got an airdrop coming through at the beginning of next week on the 22nd of May. We're going to get this video out towards the end of this week. Tell us a little bit about that, and then, you know, what your plans are, and then ultimately, like, you know, what is the dream for you in terms of VirtuSwap?
Sure. Let me start with the dream, and then we'll go to the short term.
I like
that. So basically, what we want to do, right, and what we want to become is basically in this kind of market segment of this 99% or kind of longer tail assets, right? That we said that it's a pretty long, pretty large, segment. We want to become there what Curve has become for another segment of approximately the same size, and that is trading among stablecoins, right? So trading among stablecoins was there before Curve. It was just not efficient, right? Curve made it right. Same thing here, right? So the risk trading in those other assets is just not efficient, and we want to make this right. Okay, so that's kind of the long-term vision, right? So we want to be that. Now, in the medium term, right, we're focusing on two things. The first one is more financial innovation. In particular, we're developing what we call a hedging module, which basically is a way for you as a new project to list on VirtuSwap and basically get immediately exposed to trades, to direct trades against any asset of your kind of asset against any other. Now, right now, it's not possible, right? Because that would require other pools to accept, your new asset into their reserves. That's something that's not appealing, right? And so we are basically devising a mechanism of this risk sharing, right? Basically having people who would be hedgers, who would be taking this risk upon themselves. That could be the project itself, and that basically would allow direct trading between any new token and all the other kind of assets in the ecosystem. So that's one direction. This kind of financial innovation. This is just one example. The second one is the kind of the data science part of things, right? So right now we have this AI-based system of optimizing liquidity allocation among pools, right? It works well. It really delivers results. The only issue with that right now is that it's completely centralized. We do this now. And then there's two problems with centralization. The first one is that it's kind of it doesn't go well with this kind of ethos of this ecosystem. But more importantly, right, we do these things well, we think, but I don't want to claim that this is the very best solution that one can find. And so decentralizing this, right, basically allowing people to submit their ideas or their solutions for the optimal allocation of liquidity, right? And building a whole decentralized system for incentivizing, right? Having proposer and solvers and verifiers of solution, right? In order again to reach to this place where the liquidity really is there all the time in places where it's needed most, right? So this decentralization of our AI-based engine that we call Minerva is kind of our plan for, I guess, 2024 or so. It's a longer-term kind of project. It's not easy at all, but I think that's that is going to bring tons of advantages to, and not just to us, right? So in principle, this can be deployed for other players in the ecosystem as well. I mean, this liquidity optimization, that's not something that's unique to us, right? We can basically run this or similar system for Balancer or Dodo or Curve, whatever. To see where the liquidity should be, and this is a good thing for the ecosystem as a whole. That's kind of the sorry.
No. So when I was researching what you guys were doing, I really liked the name. I think Minerva's cool. For me, you know what it does? It kind of like conjures up the idea and the image of vaults. It's kind of like, you describe them as like safety deposit boxes. I see it as vaults. Like there's been quite a lot, well, not a lot, but there's been a number of projects that have come to the fore in the last 6 months, which, kind of like empower users to be able to create their own vaults and their own strategies. And this is almost, from, the way that I visualize it, a very similar kind of thing. It's like you creating an autonomous, decentralized object or liquidity pool, which allows you to obviously participate in a strategy. I think the challenge around the decentralization aspect of it from a DAO perspective is that if you had an umbrella DAO that looks over this whole thing, it might become a little bit challenging in terms of managing it. It's almost better to kind of just let it run free and see how it plays out on its own, and then having the ability to then nominate to bring that vault or that strategy in. That might work.
No, this is a great point. Actually, in fact, we are right now kind of debating. So we are definitely going to have a combination of the two, right? So we're going to have this kind of AI-based optimization. We're also going to have kind of the possibility of people, voting or deciding, or with their feet or with their money, basically, where the liquidity should be. So eventually it's going to be a combination of those two things. We're kind of tinkering with the exact kind of weights and importance of the two kind of methods for liquidity allocation. But you're exactly right. So to the short term, right? So so the short term, right? So we're going to have about I guess 4 phases of launch. So the product itself, the DEX itself, is going to be launched on May 29th, right? So that's in about 12 days from now. Before that, a week before that, on May 22nd, as you mentioned, we're going to have our airdrop, right? So let me say a couple of words about the airdrop. So we're basically targeting people who are going to be relevant for us going forward, right? And those are 2 types of people: liquidity providers in smaller assets, right, who basically have provided liquidity in pools involving assets outside of top 5 on other DEXs throughout the last year. Okay, that's one. The second group of people is people who basically made trades involving, or indirect trades involving, those 99% assets and lost money as a result, right? So basically what's going to happen is that you're going to go to our airdrop website, you're going to connect your wallet, and we're going to check, right, whether you belong to either one or more, maybe both of those 2 camps, right? A liquidity provider in the 99% assets and a trader that has, suffered excessive trading costs as a result of trading in those assets. We have a database of all liquidity provisions. We have a database of all relevant trades, right? So we just basically check your wallet against this database. If you are one of those people, right, you're going to get rewards, actually quite significant ones. You can get up to 4,000 VRSW as a result of this action, right? So up to 3,000 VRSW if you are a relevant liquidity provider, and up to 1,000 if you're a relevant trader, and obviously you can be both. So that's our way to attract really the people who are just not just random kind of airdrop hunters, right? But people who could be relevant for us, in actual kind of trading, right? Who really, realize the problems, right? And are seeking a solution.
I like the fact that you are looking at, like, I immediately love the fact it's like, if you did a trade on, low liquidity coins and you lost money, we're going to give you an airdrop. I love that. I think it's so cool that you're actually prepared to take money out of your pocket and say, here we go, like come play on our DEX. I think it's great.
And we also tell them not just that we're giving them our token, right? We're actually telling them, you lost, $35 on this trade, right? You'll know exactly how much you lost as a result. And you might want to try something that in the future is going to eliminate those losses.
That's awesome. I think we need more of that. I really like the fact that you've gone through the trouble of doing that due diligence. It's not just, rewarding the whales, which inevitably happens with airdrops. And I'm sure we could chat about that for ages, just that alone. Like, it just infuriates me that the whales, they end up benefiting, and kind of like the little guys just hardly don't get anything. So it's really cool to see that you guys have taken the time do that. Your long-term goal, I think, is really cool. It'll be really interesting to see, like how, the curve model does apply outside of curve, because I think it's working to a huge extent. I think curve's got its challenges at the moment. I think the biggest one's obviously the bear market, but they've got their challenges, which I think they are addressing. I think from an emissions perspective, that's always been a challenge. And then who's controlling those emissions is also a big challenge for them. But I think the principles of the pools themselves are sound. They've been proven to be sound. I mean, the fact that, you mentioned that we had all these problems, last year with FTX and centralized exchanges, we had the same problems on chain, where a lot of people were being liquidated, and those pools really did handle, and, are they handled? And that's obviously a testimony to this technology. I think the closing part of this whole interview is that, firstly, you've raised a ton of interesting points that we could probably talk about on individuals basis. I think from a tokenomics perspective, I think like VirtuSwap's got some interesting ideas that could be a roundtable discussion in the future. Maybe we should do it. We can maybe find, others who are doing similar stuff. I think the mechanism that you guys are working, and then possibly, the inception, or should I say the perfection of Minerva, is going to be interesting to see. That could be a discussion on its own. And then good luck with the launch. I don't know.
Thank you.
I don't know how the market's going to react. If it was a bull market, I'd say you guys would be printing by week 2, like, but we don't know. It's like, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. So best of luck with that. How are you guys feeling about the launch and what's to come?
Well, so we are ready for it, right? We're talking to liquidity providers. We're talking to a lot of people. We're quite optimistic, but to the extent that you can be optimistic in this market. But you're right. I mean, we'll see. It's but we're here kind of. It's not a short-term thing, right? So we're here to to stay, right? And if it is kind of slower that we would like to right now, it's fine. It's going to pick up anyway.
I think it's really important to keep that long-term view in mind. A lot of founders get pressured. I've seen it with so many founders. I've sat across the table from you guys so often, and it's like, you can see the guys want the success. They're chasing it. They've worked hard for it. And the only thing I can say, just from experience, is like, it will happen. If you've got this great idea, just be patient and it will happen. And like I said, if it was a bull market, we'd probably get like 100,000 views on this video and you guys would be printing. But, so let's look to that. I mean, it's coming. It's been really cool to have you on, Prof. Not calling you Evgeny ever again. It's going to be Prof from here on out. It's been cool. It's been very cool to chat to you. I mean, obviously a lot has come out. The hour's gone really quickly, and I really appreciate your time. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a great interview. Really appreciate it.